Okay, it is our pleasure to bring in a figurehead in the world of boxing. He is a newly inducted member of the Boxing Hall of Fame, former head of HBO Boxing, currently a promoter, the founder of DiBella Promotions. Lou DiBella, how you doing today, Lou?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Isolating comfortably. I'm all right.
Yes. Like everyone. It's I never thought I'd see so many in-home shots of so many people who we never see at home.
No, it's actually crazy. But I got to tell you something. I thought they did a pretty good job. I'm putting the light up in the room. I thought they did a pretty good job in the NFL draft last night. It was actually watchable.
I thought so too.
It was nice to have something that related to real sports.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So I would love to know, everybody's talking about this, and I think things that have happened with the UFC is what has everyone really talking about it even more. And that's how boxing is going to look when it comes back. Because I think everybody knows when it first comes back, it's probably going to be without a live audience. So I would love to hear, an industry veteran like yourself, your take on what you think it's going to look like.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's got to be some level of creativity, particularly if we're going to be doing boxing in an empty room for a prolonged period of time. So I think people are going to have to work on how to make it as presentable and entertaining as possible, because in an empty room without crowd noise, hearing the coach's instructions to the fighter, it has to be a really good fight to be good television. My concern is I don't know that you're going to get the biggest and best fights in an empty room.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be impediments to that. Like, for example, can you see a Canelo and Triple G happening in an empty room?
No.
When Canelo's contracted to a streaming service, so it's not even pay-per-view as a possibility. I don't see that happening. And I don't see the fighters wanting to fight that kind of fight in an empty room. So I think you're going to see maybe some matchups that are, getting guys in the ring. I personally want to see competitive fighting. I don't really care the names of the fighters at this point. I just want to see something where the outcome is in doubt and there's live competition. So I think that boxing's going to fill a void eventually, and we'll be back. But in terms of the bigger fight, like the more expensive stuff, I don't know how it's going to be presented. I don't know if they've thought that through yet. And also, I'm curious as to, like, you heard the other day, didn't you think it was sort of wild when Bud Crawford said, if I'm going to fight in an empty room, I want to get paid more money? Like, dude, I hear you. It's like not pleasant to fight or work in an empty room or do anything. You're an entertainer. I can get that you don't want to be in an empty room, but where do you think there's going to be more money for that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of that money comes from the crowded room.
Look, here's what's going to happen also. In order to make really good fights, like big-name fighters and competitive fights, when there's less revenue, the fighter has to want to work with the television entity, with the promoter. The fighter's going to have to want to work to make the fight possible. The question's going to be, are fighters going to be willing to leave money on the table for significant or dangerous fights from the get-go? If I'm right, unfortunately, my experience tells me it's going to take a while for there to be an adjustment to the new world.
Yeah.
And so I don't see guys running to say, I'm willing to take less for a better fight or a more competitive fight. So I think the guys that are going to come back are the guys most willing to negotiate. And I also think it's going to be highly competitive fights that were already put together that aren't particularly expensive, where the gate is not going to completely destroy the economics of the event. Now,
you were mentioning, I'm sorry, Peter.
Go ahead, please. I talk too often. It's okay.
No, okay. I got this one kind of concept in my head. I just want to wonder just how you would see this. I totally agree that they're going to have to be extremely creative. And I think Peter and I talked about that, of how you make in-studio boxing deliver some things that maybe the traditional presentation of boxing doesn't deliver. If they approach the fighter say even a fighter that you promote, and said, hey, you know what, we got to do some different stuff with this presentation, but we're willing to try to build your brand, make this worth your while, and produce this in something of like a documentary style, even like live as we're doing this whole entire fight. We're giving and we're going to sell this experience in a different way in hopes of increasing this engagement. Do you think that's one of those things?
Anything is open right now.
Okay.
I think everything is open. I think this is a period where we have to weather a storm, and we also have to make sure that fighters can earn a living, and that goes beyond just the star, big name guys. So I think, you know, if they want to see shorter rounds and experiment with shorter fights, if they want to see competitive 6 and 8 rounders between pro fighters, if they want to look at producing it a different way and making it look more like a gladiator thing, because it's just you really want to keep people away from people. I mean, I think we're going to have to be open to some levels of creativity. Right?
Have you heard any of that stuff? Like this,
kicking around ideas, but at the same time, you know, got to remember something: we're state regulated. Medicals have to go through states. Doctors are involved. There's all sorts of politics involved to boxing. A lot more politically involved in doing boxing right now than doing MMA, because MMA is much more its own self-contained world. So they have it a little bit easier. I mean, they're regulated by certain states, but very differently than boxing is. So, like, I expect Dana to be able to do an event in May, and as scheduled. I would bet this time it happens. But I don't think he has the same roadblocks that we have. He may have roadblocks from going at the Apex in Nevada, but I don't think he has the same roadblocks to do an event someplace. You know, to try to do it in a safe manner and do it someplace, because you know, like for example, in a boxing match, the referees, the judges, they're all state regulated too. If you try to do a fight that involves an organization or a title of any kind, and then you have other people involved. How do those people get there? Is there travel? There's so many issues. We're so far away from being able to figure, you know, out exactly how this would work. But I'm going to guess that somewhere midsummer, you'll see boxing in a studio setting with no crowd.
I mean, when do we really realistically think that we're going to see people back in arenas?
I have my doubts on 20. I'd be surprised if it was this year.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe within a certain select market or so, but people travel to that event. I mean, might there be in a state where there hasn't been a big outbreak or whatever, boxing with some level of distancing in the crowd or whatever? I think you could see something before the end of the year, but I don't think, like, for example, take my state, I don't think you're going to see boxing in front of an audience in New York State in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, and look, with all these shows that are coming back, and you and I have talked about this, for the audience that doesn't know, I manage 2 fighters that Lou promotes, George Kambosos Jr., who was supposed to be fighting Lee Selby on May 9th, Lou? May 9th for the IBF Eliminator to face the winner of Lomachenko Lopez. And also we work together with Emmanuel Tego, who's a top-rated lightweight. Of which I want to point out, you know, unlike a lot of promoters, you know, Lou really stepped up and paid Tego's full purse for a fight he never fought in March that was going to take place in Atlantic City. But what I was going to say is, even when things come back into studio environment, like Lou said, it's going to really be up to the fighters that are able to agree and be able to turn around quickly and be prepared for a fight. You know, let alone the medicals that need to be done. These guys have to have some sort of a camp. Not everyone has the ability to train. Like, not every fight, you know, we see on social media guys training in a garage, doing this, not everyone has that ability. Some guys are going to have maybe 4 weeks to prepare and possibly not really have the sparring that they need. So what do you think from a preparation standpoint? What do you think it looks like?
If you were asked by one of your fighters right now, I think you would give a similar answer to what I would give. If they asked, when are we coming back? When are we going to be fighting? The answer is, we don't know.
Right. Yeah, but I tell them to do what you can. Be as ready as you can. If it's just road work, shadow boxing, some sort of, you know, calisthenics. If you can't hit a heavy back, if you can't do anything else, do the most that you can. Eat clean. I mean, stay as close to your fighting weight as possible, because eventually some iteration of this is going to exist.
Well served by staying where they're 4 or 5 weeks physically away from being able to fight. I mean, that doesn't mean I think we're going to start in 4 or 5 weeks. But I think when people start moving toward restarting, it's going to happen rather quickly, and matches are going to have to be made rather quickly. And I think fighters who are ready to fight are going to have an advantage. And frankly, fighters that are going to understand that there's not greater revenue now, there's diminished revenue, and are willing to, have their purses take into account the state of the industry. In other words, a guy that's going to hold to his a $3 million guarantee to fight an appearance fight is likely to wait longer than somebody that will take less to fight a real fight.
Yeah. Now, because we're on quarantine and because there's not really any real boxing news to discuss right now, right? Everything is people trying to be creative and everybody trying to speculate and sort of things, because you got to keep the conversation going. I got to ask you, as someone who has been around the business so long, and also somebody who's pretty active on social media, especially on Twitter, what are some of the things that you hear that kind of drive you crazy that you see consistently during this time?
I mean, there's a bunch of little things, okay, like that, and maybe I got to be honest, I'm getting like complete cabin fever, and I'm probably pestier and more easily pissed off than I usually am. Okay, but listening to guys call each other out and talk trash at each other, who don't seem to have any desire to want to make those fights happen when fighting is actually going on, and now they're all of a sudden, oh, we don't fight for any particular side of the street, and we just want to fight, and we're ready to sign a piece of paper, and we'll fight tomorrow. No, you won't. And some of that, but we know what, we need to keep relevant. We need to keep sort of chirping at each other. I get that. I looking for controversies that aren't really there. I mean, I thought Devin Haney said something stupid, but to hear someone associate a black kid saying, I ain't gonna lose to a white boy, with indicating that that's somehow some heinous act of racism is trash. It's just not true, and that bothered me. It bothered me that I think that how overblown that was. Honestly.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can hear you.
I also think the idea we're going to come back bigger and better than ever immediately, and everything's going to, this Trumpian sort of boxing view, that we're going to come back and you're going to see the biggest and best fights, and everyone's going to get right to the bottom line. We're going to pop right back in empty rooms with Spence and Crawford and Wilder and Fury, and no, we're not. We're going to get back to living something of a normal life in stages and slowly, the way the whole rest of the country is going to, the way restaurants are going to open when they eventually do, the way Broadway in New York City will open eventually when it does. But we don't know when that is yet. And when it happens, it's going to be sort of a process and a gradual thing. So I prefer for people to be preparing for what's real, as opposed to living in a world of fantasy, and thinking that everything will get back to normal in a couple of months is fantasy.
I mean, I do think that boxing is in a better position than some other major sports. And as you know, for the viewers that don't know, you own 2 minor league baseball teams. I mean, there are some sports that have no shot at coming back. I mean, what are you facing right now with baseball?
I don't know about Major League Baseball. I mean, they could go through that expense and the negotiation with their own players to figure out how to make it work and try to do it in a controlled setting. And I think I've read stuff that they're still trying to see if they can save the season. I would be shocked if there's going to be a minor league season, because we have no TV or radio money. We're completely dependent on, the live gate and the live experience, the concessions and the beer sales and food and all the other stuff that goes into a live game experience. And we're not going to be able to have crowds in Richmond, Virginia, probably this season. So I'm thinking that it's likely that we're going to probably not have a season. That's hard to deal with. Boxing is easier to come back from the standpoint of having fewer participants. There's just 2 fighters in the ring. You may have to rethink the closeness to the referee. But the other, the judges, there are a number of people that have to gather in a ringside area between production people, commission people, promoter people, you know, people setting up the event. You still have to have some gathering of people around that ring. So there's a lot of logistics that have to be worked out, but it's certainly easier than staging a football game.
Right, but and let's be real. I mean, boxing, some of these events are not contingent on the gate revenue. I mean, April 17th, as you know, I think you guys had Indongo fighting Yulusinoff. I had Chris Van Heerden fighting DeMarco in Oklahoma. I mean, how many tickets was Top Rank selling anyway? 1,500, 2,000 tickets to that show?
There's a whole level of event that the gate is really not that important.
Right.
Strangely, because there are a lot of highly paid fighters and champions who frankly don't sell tickets, even though they get paid a lot of money for services, those fights are sort of cost effective. Where it's not cost effective is a fight that could do a $15 million, $20 million gate. Then it makes no sense to do a fight in front of nobody. You don't burn that fight in front of nobody.
But I'm sure you have fighters in the stable that, you know, when you really look at I mean, let's be honest, you were willing to put that show on in Atlantic City with Tego and Ray Perez, and the anticipation of a big gate probably wasn't there. But, you know, you're able to have your UFC Fight Pass participation, and you're able to get that fight out there. So
there are ways to make it work. I mean, it can work on various levels of significance too. I mean, you know, is there a level of fight that works for DAZN? I tend to think that if Prograis and Hooker was the first fight back on, you know, boxing main event back on U.S. soil and on TV here, it would do an enormous viewership. You know, and it's also a lot more cost effective than a Triple G or a Canelo fight, or a Wilder or Fury fight, or a Joshua fight. I think people are going to get creative. I think Eddie's probably, I really believe Matchroom will probably begin by doing events in the UK. I think you might see some events in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia or Dubai again, where there has not really been much of an outbreak. And where you can privately fly in and work out probably logistics easier than you may in some other places.
Right.
But I'm really, like, you know, I'm sort of as curious as you are to see how we come back.
Do you think that the first fighters back will have an opportunity to create a bigger name for themselves and like to enhance their brands? Because if promoters and networks are really getting behind it properly, they'll be like, okay, these two guys are literally ushering the sport back into the United States.
You know, I don't know, because here's what I think. You still have three, the most secure entities as platforms for boxing are still PBC through Fox and Showtime, ESPN and Top Rank, and DAZN, you know, and Cole and Matchroom and Hearn. And they all have a lot of fighters under contract. And I don't think we're going to be getting back to 4 fight cards a weekend, when it's not returning in a giant flourish, when it's so difficult to do it. It's going to be much more expensive to stage a fight in front of no one, with the testing and distancing and other details that are going to have to be followed to make it work. It's more expensive to do that, and you're getting far less revenue for most events. So, you know, it's not, it's certainly not an ideal way to restart things.
So, Brian, I have one more question for Lou, because I know Lou has to go here soon, but I wanted your opinion, Lou. So the longer that this goes on, some of these bigger fights like Lomachenko Lopez, you know, Canelo Triple G, some of these guys are going to have a lot of inactivity. I mean, by the time Lomachenko theoretically fights Lopez, he could have been out of the ring for a year. Do you think they go straight into fights like that, or do you think that, like the fans think, that all of a sudden it's just going to come back and it's going to be the best of the best?
No, because fighters are still going to have their self-interest in mind. If you haven't fought for a long, long time, and you just went through a stressful thing like the whole rest of the country did, you want to come back in a completely alien circumstance in an empty room when you never fought in front of an empty room, even when you were an amateur, you virtually never fought in front of nobody. You're going to come back in a socially distanced empty room without proper gym training, without what you're used to, and come right back into the hardest fight of your career. No, guys are going to be resistant to that. And it's, and by the way, you can't totally blame them. Now, other guys are going to come back and say, just put someone in front of me. I don't give a blank. I want to fight. Put someone in front of me, and let's discuss what you're paying me, and let's go. And going to what you said, Brian, could somebody be advantaged now through this? The way someone would be advantaged is by coming in this and saying, I understand what's going on out there. I just want to get in the ring. Let's work out a deal that works for both of us to get me back in the ring. I'll do what it takes. Let's figure it out. And that guy could become somebody's hero. Yeah.
That's kind of how I was picturing it. I'm picturing somebody who might not have normally gotten that shine, but because they were willing to play ball, they were able to get some exposure, maybe even get a couple wins, and suddenly this time ended up launching their career.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be Brian. I sort of think when this comes back, promoters and television services or streaming entities are going to be going to fighters and saying, this is the fight I want you to fight. And if they say no, or they start negotiating too hard, I think they're going to move on to one of the other 100 fighters they have to take care of with a limited number of slots. So I just think it's going to change by nature. So if you're the fighter that's going to approach it with the attitude of, I'm going to do what I need to do, Also, I think the tough fights that were made, fights like Selby Kambosos, which is a very affordable fight, not an expensive fight, but a very competitive fight. I expect that fight to be easier to happen. A fight like Prograis and Hooker, where there were two big names in a 50-50 fight, getting paid on the lower end of the big money, Those fights, and a fight like that, by the way, wasn't anticipating, as Peter pointed out earlier, that was the kind of fight where you weren't anticipating a huge gate. So the economics of the event don't totally get warped. I think those kind of fights should be the first ones that you're going to see coming back. Also, they happen to be quality fights, which you don't want to come back with, in an empty room, something that's less than entertaining.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Lou, I certainly appreciate your time, and I hope that you're staying safe. The next time, hopefully, we get a chance to talk to you, we got to talk about some old school hip hop, because we often vibe on Twitter when we're talking about some of the stuff. And I'm like, yeah, Lou and I's playlist is probably similar. So
probably similar. I was watching the NFL draft last night, so I didn't see it, but there was a whole streaming hip hop thing with a lot of old school talent.
It was a lot of old school talent, and then they've been doing, like, I don't know if you saw the DJ battle with DJ Premier and the RZA. They did a DJ battle. It was pretty awesome. So yeah.